If you find yourself in a position where you need to take out a loan for, say, a large appliance or maybe even a car, or maybe you're in the position of loaning someone the money for a large appliance or a car, then you may find that credit unions and even car dealerships still give loans using simple interest. And so you might decide that before you go in to get that loan, that you would like to see what it's going to take, how many months, what kind of percentages would you like to pay. And it could help you decide how you can stay within your budget, but still either give the loan or receive a loan for an amount that is affordable. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and today we're going to look at Google Sheets and how to find out simple interest payments by using the payment, interest payment, and principal payment functions. Looking at our example today, I have already put in some of the information that I think I would like to see if I have taken out a loan. And of course, maybe this name is not anything that I need, but if I'm giving out loans, that might be something that I would want to put in. For the loan amount, we're just going to get a loan for $10,000. And I'm not even going to put in the commas or the dollar signs or anything like that. Now, for the annual percentage rate, it could be, I guess, even 3 to 5%, depending on the kind of loan. But we're going to keep this easy so it's easier to just see the math. So we're going to just say 1%. And then the loan length. Now, this can be changed as many times as you need to make sure that what you want to pay is, or what you can pay is how this is going to work. For us in our example, I think a typical loan can be 5 years, especially for a car. So we'll just say 5 years. And then as we look at the columns, I have already, well, instead of period, let's say payment number here. And so every time I make a payment, I can see that this is the payment number. And I know that 5 years is 60 payments. But when I get to payment 45, I think I'm going to feel really good if I see that number beside the payment that I'm making. So I kind of want to keep track of those numbers just because that's something that I like to know. Now, how to determine the payment, that is really important. And we're going to click in B8 so that we can figure out what the payment is going to be. And we'll go up to the toolbar and go to the right to the Functions button and click on it. And any of these payment, interest payment, principal payment functions can be found in Financial. And then I'm going to go over to find PMT. So let's click on PMT. And then we get the syntax, the pattern of the different elements that we need to put into this particular formula. We need to put in the rate. Well, the rate is the annual percentage rate, which in this case is 1%. So I can click on that, but we aren't paying by the year, we're paying by the month. So we need to divide that 1% by 12. Now there's something else that we need to do, and that is make sure that we have an absolute reference to B4. As we copy this formula, we don't want the reference to B4 to change. So we'll definitely put in a dollar sign in front of the B and 1 in front of the 4. And then our pattern here says we need to have a comma. And what do we need to put in next? Well, the number of periods. Well, we know that we have 5 years, so I can click on B5, and I know that I don't want that reference to change, so I'm going to go ahead and put a $ in front of the B and in front of the 5. But now, B5 is years. Well, we're paying by the month, so it's really B5 times 12. And then we need to put in a comma. Present value is simply what is the loan amount? What did we borrow when we took out the money? Well, what we took out was B3, the $10,000. And again, we want to be sure to have the $ in front of the B and in front of the 3. And then we can simply press enter. And that tells us that we are going to be paying $170.94 each month. Now, we do get a negative $170.94, and that's because if we were paying this out of our checkbook, then it would be a negative. But a lot of these kinds of tables, which are really amortization tables, show this as a positive amount because it's just a sort of abstract number rather than something that's coming out of a ledger. So what we can do here is click in B8, and 2 negatives are a positive. So what we can do is come up and click in that formula bar between the equal sign and the PMT and put in a subtraction sign. And then press enter, and now we get the positive 170.94. And then we can go to this little circle. It's in the lower right of our cell. Find the skinny plus sign and click and drag down. And so each one of those 60 payments is going to be $170.94. Now, I would like to know what that total is, so I'm going to come down just a little bit farther here to B69, and I would like to get the total of that column. So first of all, I need to say equals sum, and it's already suggesting here B8 through B67, which is correct. So I can simply say, absolutely, that would be perfect. And I have a choice to tab to accept, so I'm going to tab. Now, when I tab, look at this total. Here's the $10,000. That is what I initially borrowed. But on top of that, we're going to be paying interest over time, 5 years, and that is going to be $256.25. Now let's go back up to the top, and we're going to click in C8 where we can keep track of how much we have paid and how much more we need to pay. While an amortization table doesn't have this column of what I've paid, I kind of like to keep track of where I am when I have a loan. So let's say that I've paid the first month. That is $170.94. And then I want to keep a total of what I have paid. So each month I will put in, hopefully, $170.94. Now let's go down to the bottom of that column, and we can copy over the total in B69 to C69, which should reflect the payment that I have made. Now, as I add more payments, this will adjust. The only thing is, it's clear down here in C69, and I would like to be able to see these two numbers, what is in B69 and what is in C69 at the top. So let's go to the top and look at that. In E2, it says, what is the total owed? Well, that is B69, so I can just simply type equals B69, and I'm not going to copy this anyplace, so that works out beautifully. And it tells me that I have 10, 256, 25. And that is correct. Now let's come down to E5 because the balance due should be E2, that 10, 256.25, and I need to subtract what is in C69. So let's do that. Equals E2 minus C69. And we'll press enter. And it's slightly lower, isn't it? Because we've made one payment. Well, let's come down to C9 and let's add a payment for the second month, just so we can see what happens. And look at that, 2 payments, and we now have less than $10,000 that we owe. And if we want to know how much we have paid, we can come all the way down to C69 to see that we've paid $341. So it becomes a nice way to keep track of what I have paid, where I am in the payments, and how much more I have to go before I'm finished. What we have so far might suffice for what you want to know and how you work with numbers. But what if you want to know how much interest you are paying every time you pay that $170? What is it? And we also know that with interest, it's kind of loaded toward the front, so the very first payments, you pay more interest than you do at the end. Well, we can use an interest payment function. To do that, we'll go back up to the toolbar and go to the right to that Functions button and click. And then we'll go down to Financial. And now this time what we are looking for is IPMT, Interest Payment. And click on it. Now we have basically the same answers that we need to give that we gave for payment, with one exception. So let's look at this. First of all, we need to determine the rate. Well, the rate is 1% annually, so we need to click on B4, but remember that's annually. We're going to pay by the month, so we will divide by 12. If we paid by the quarter, we would divide by 4. And we also need to be careful to remember that we don't want to have that reference to B4 move. We want it to be absolute. So we're going to make sure that there's a $sign in front of the B and in front of the 4. And then according to the pattern, the syntax of this function, we need to put in a comma. And then we need to figure out what period we are paying for, because remember, the interest changes every month. So fortunately, we already set that up when we said, well, I want to know if I'm on payment 5 or 25. So all we need to do is click on A8. That is the payment, and that will adjust as we copy the formula down, and then we will put in a comma. So what is the number of periods? Now this is something that we've answered before. We know how to do this. So we can click on B5, and that's the number of years, but we're paying by the month, so it's times 12. And again, we want to keep that reference to B and 5, so we'll put $signs in front of both. And then after the 12, we're going to put in a comma. And what is the present value? The present value is the kind of base amount of money that I've borrowed or loaned, either way, which is the $10,000. So it's the money that was borrowed before interest was applied and before time was applied. And again, that reference needs to stay the same. Now I could actually type 10,000, but we've used cell references, and it's always a good idea to use cell references, because let's say that you decide that, well, 10,000 isn't quite enough. Maybe I could change that loan a little bit. Maybe I found something that's 15,000 or 20,000. And so I could type in B3 the amount of the loan. And let's say that the APR changes. Well, you could simply type in the new rate, and yet because we're using cell references in our formula, we don't have to go in and make any corrections in the formulas themselves. And then we can press enter. This will do an autofill, and it says we can use Control Enter to autofill, or we can use the check mark. So we'll just use the check mark. And it says the formula has been applied. So let's see. It starts with, in D8, we're going to pay $8.33 that first month on the interest. And then as we go down, you can see that even by month 17, we're only paying $6 interest. And then as we continue to go down, now we're in the $5 range, 4, 3, 2, 1. And at the end, that last payment, you're only paying 14 cents for that last month for the interest that is owed. Now, since I have in C69 a sum function, I'm going to go ahead and copy that over to D69. And a couple things happen here. This is really kind of interesting, and it's a reminder that this is also a payment of some kind, so it's negative. Let's go back up to the top. And if you don't want your interest to show as negative, what can you do? You go just to the right of the equal sign and put in a minus sign, a minus symbol, and press enter. And then you copy that down all the way down your column so that you have positive numbers to read. And it all depends on how you see numbers and how this function is going to be used. But as we look at this, what is really interesting is, remember our initial value that we are borrowing is $10,000, and it shows us very plainly that the $256.25 is what we are paying back in interest. If you are curious about what the interest is that you're paying each month, and chances are you're also kind of curious about the principal. And yes, you could take the payment and subtract the interest from it, but why not use a formula that will help you just automatically know what all that is? Well, we can go to E8 and then back to the Functions button, go down to Financial, and this time what we are looking for is PPMT, Payment on the Principal. And PPMT is virtually identical to IPMT in what they ask. So first of all, what is the rate? Well, the rate is this 1% divided by 12 months. So annually, it's 1%, but we are dividing that by 12 and paying a portion each month. We again need to put in the dollar signs in front of the B and the 4. And then after the 12, type the comma. What period are we on? Well, in this case, again, it's just the first payment, number 1. And we want this to actually adjust as we go down the column. So we'll keep it at A8. Add a comma. What is the number of periods? Well, this is how many months are we going to pay. So we'll go to B5, which is the 5 years, but we're paying monthly, so that's times 12. And then we're going to put a dollar sign in front of the B and in front of the 5 because we want those to be absolute references. And then after the 12, let's put in a comma. And what is the present value? What was the initial loan? Well, it was 10,000 B3. And we once again are going to put in the dollar signs for the absolute reference. And then we can press enter. Now the only thing is, just like interest and payment, principal is a negative value because it's coming out of your checkbook. But we just want to see it as a positive number in this table. So I'm going to go up to the formula bar, and between the equal sign and the PPMT, I'm going to put a minus sign and then press enter. And now I can copy this down. And we can see that then at the last payment, while we're only paying 14 cents in interest, we're paying $170.80 in the principal. And we can also go to D69, find that little fill handle, click and drag over and copy that, and look at that. It says that we are going to pay $10,000 in the principal. Everything is working really well. Now, it could be that you are completely happy with everything that we have done so far, but it could be that you look at the interest and the principal payments and you say, yeah, but do they really equal $170.94? How can I tell that? Well, in F8 here, we're starting another column, and it's really just for fun more than anything, but we can say, well, all right, equals. And then what do we want to add? Well, we want to add the principal in E8 plus the interest in D8, and then we can press enter, and it equals $170.94. Well, then if you are really kind of suspicious of how this all works, let's say that you think, well, okay, so the first month it did that, but what about number 20? Well, we can find the fill handle here, that circle, click and drag down. We can copy this formula all the way down the column. And every time I look at this column, the answer is the same. The payment is $170.94, and I can even go to E69 and copy that formula to the right one column, and sure enough, $10,256.25 is the same as what is in column B. So everything very easily works out and is a very easy way to determine simple interest payments. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online learning for such great resources as Universal Class, Learning Express Library, LinkedIn Learning, and Udemy Business. We also premiere videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. If you miss a video premiere, you'll still be able to find it later when it's convenient for you. You can find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, and you can find us on YouTube by going to our MCPL MO channel.